Hey there, everyone. Welcome into this week's Weather Extra. I'm First Alert Meteorologist Jillian Johnson. We went on one crazy weather roller coaster last week that featured record highs and also some of the coolest air since April. We kick off Weather Extra by taking a look back at last week's wild weather here in Central Texas. Above normal heat was the major weather story for us in Central Texas. Since September 27th through October 15th, temperatures at the Waco Regional Airport were at or above 90 degrees. Before the fall air moved in on October 16th, you'd have to go back to September 26th for the last time we had a cooler than normal day, and also a day where highs were in the 80s. Not only did we have a 19-day streak of 90-degree or hotter temperatures officially in the season of fall, but we also saw some of the hottest temperatures ever recorded throughout the month of October. Sunday, October 13th, the temperatures reached 104 degrees. That broke the record high for the day, which was 96, set back in 1991. This also broke the previous record for the latest 100-degree occurrence in a calendar year. But just when we thought that would be the latest 100-degree day on record, Tuesday, October 15th occurred. High temperatures reached up to 100 degrees Tuesday, which also set a new record high for the day. The old record was 95, set back in 2022, and also back in 2015 and 1910. This also makes October 15th the latest time Central Texas has ever seen triple-digit temperatures occur in a year. The average latest 100-degree day should fall on August the 29th. That means this 100-degree temperature occurred 47 days later than normal. Here's a look at the latest 90-degree and 100-degree day tracker for our three major cities in Central Texas. Waco has seen 108 90-degree days and 21 100-degree days. Temple has seen 111 90-degree days and 20 100. Killeen has seen more triple-digit heat with 24 100-degree days and 109 90. The coldest air of last week's fall front settled in the morning of Thursday, October 17th. Here's a look at the morning lows recorded across the area. That 42-degree temperature recorded at the Waco Regional Airport was the coldest morning in 178 days since April 22nd. October is on average the second wettest month of the year in Central Texas. We should see a little under 4.5 inches fall on average. But so far this month, only trace amounts of rain have fallen thanks to last week's cold front. There's only been one October in Central Texas history that featured no measurable rain throughout the month, and that occurred back in 1952. The last time we had more than 1/10 of an inch of rainfall at the Waco Regional Airport was 36 days ago on September 15th, when a little more than 1/4 inch fell. You have to go back nearly 50 days for the last time more than 1/2 an inch fell, and the last time we had more than 1 inch of rainfall was back on May the 31st, when 1.44 inches fell. Over the past week, you might have had the opportunity to catch a glimpse of a rare comet passing through the early night sky here in Central Texas. This comet hasn't passed near Earth in 80,000 years, and you still have a chance to see it with your own eyes. News 10's Isabella Quintanilla has more on how to witness this once-in-a-lifetime comet.
It's not every day a comet passes through the Earth's sky, much less one like this.
It truly is maybe a once in a lifetime.
Johnny Barton with the Central Texas Astronomical Society says what makes this comet so rare is how easy it is to see.
We don't normally get a comet this bright very often. It's about every 20 years or so that we do get a comet that's visible to the unaided eye.
It was first discovered back in January of 2023 by an observatory in China and then later confirmed to be a comet by the Atlas Group, earning it its name.
The official name is C 2023 A3 Sushishan Atlas.
And after months of watching it travel through space, it's finally here, but only briefly.
It's within about 44 million miles of Earth. It made its closest passage on the 12th. And it's going away from us now.
The best visibility was this past weekend, but it will still be visible for the next few days. In fact, as it heads away from the Earth, the sun's gravitational pull will make the comet's tail longer.
It was very impressive last night. It's going to be very impressive for the next few nights.
You just have to know when and where to look.
It's going to take it till about 7:30, 7:45, maybe closer to 8 o'clock for it to get dark enough to see. And it's going to be in that same area where the sun went down.
If you need help finding it, all you have to do is grab a pair of binoculars or just use your phone camera. Barton warns that it will get harder to see as it heads back into space, traveling at about 180,000 miles an hour.
It's going to be moving about 4 or 5 degrees across the sky each night. So it's going to be getting a little higher each night. and a little further away from us each night.
And once this comet is gone, it won't be visible from Earth for another 80,000 years, so be sure to go out and get some pictures. Reporting in Waco, Isabella Quintanilla, KWTX News 10.
It's been a busy week for space exploration. Here are the other top stories we've been following from outer space in the last week. The first comes as SpaceX is celebrating an astonishing achievement in its quest to develop fully reusable rockets. The company successfully launched its giant Starship rocket 1 week ago and then used mechanical arms to pull the first stage booster back to the launch pad for the first time ever. Mark Strassman shows us how they did it.
We have liftoff.
It was one giant step for SpaceX as it launched its most powerful rocket ever built.
We're now down to 3 Raptor engines.
And then flew its first stage booster back to the launch pad where giant metal arms called chopsticks grabbed it. Just 7 minutes after lifting off in Boca Chica, Texas.
What an incredible view!
The uncrewed 5th test flight. A new milestone in SpaceX's vision of developing a fully reusable rocket to return astronauts to the moon and beyond.
What SpaceX is trying to do is build the world's largest and most powerful rocket with the expectation that once it's ready to go, it will be able to carry 100 metric tons into orbit, which is far greater than any other spaceship has ever carried before. And it's expected to be reusable.
Derek Pitts is the chief astronomer at the Franklin Institute.
Reusability of spacecraft for future space exploration is extraordinarily important because reusability drives down the cost of space exploration.
The other half of the spaceship traveled halfway around the world before successfully splash landing in the Indian Ocean. Both stages are designed to be reusable, a crucial step in exploring space.
What SpaceX plans to do in the future for this spacecraft capability, though, is to take astronauts out to Mars.
Mark Strassman, CBS News.
The second story this week coming out of outer space is from NASA as they launched a new mission Monday that will give us an idea about the possibility of life outside of Earth. The Europa Clipper is at the beginning of a 1.8 billion mile journey to Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. NASA says it's one of the most promising places to look for habitable conditions in our solar system. When the spacecraft arrives, which won't be until 2030, 9 different instruments and a gravity experiment will study the ice-covered moon.
The scientific payoff is pretty dramatic. They know there is an ocean under the frozen crust of this moon, Europa. They can tell that by a variety of remote means. They're hoping to find out with this mission, is that environment habitable? In other words, are the conditions there that could enable microbial life, perhaps, to have formed and even be there today?
Europa Clipper is the largest spacecraft NASA has ever deployed for a planetary mission. When the antennas and solar arrays are fully deployed, it's about the size of a basketball court. Europa, the moon, is slightly smaller than Earth's moon, but it is surrounded by dangerous levels of radiation. To limit exposure, the Clipper will orbit around Jupiter and make 49 flybys of the moon once every 2 to 3 weeks. All right, straight ahead on Weather Extra, 2 major hurricanes struck the southeast less than 2 weeks apart. Meteorologist Brady Taylor and Sean Bellafiore take a look back at the impacts felt across Florida and much of the south from hurricanes Helene and Milton.
In less than 2 weeks time frame, we had 2 historic storms make landfall on the Florida Gulf Coast in late September, early October. So we're talking today with our resident Floridian and hurricane expert, Sean Bellafiore. So Sean, 2 major hurricanes that made landfall. If you took a step back, say 5 to 10 years from now, where would these storms kind of historically lie?
This is going to rank up there as far as some of the worst hurricanes for Florida history. And of course, you know, when we're talking about Helene specifically, the worst of it was well inland. Yeah. We're talking in the Carolinas, Tennessee, and Kentucky. So for them, this is probably one of the worst, if not the worst hurricane.
And I think it's going to go down as the deadliest hurricane since Hurricane Katrina. I think 250 roughly is on Helene, how many deaths there were. So, you know, a natural disaster, sometimes there's not a lot you can do to prevent bad things from happening on it. But I do need to give a shout out to the National Hurricane Center. So we're showing you the first forecasts that were put out for both Helene and Milton. And I mean, they did an awesome job. I mean, you can't prevent everything from happening, but, you know, the forecast didn't shift much with these storms.
They nailed the landfall location within, I want to say, 30 miles, 5 days out when these storms were just starting to get going. Brady and I, we were taking a look back at some of the storms of past. You're thinking some of these big names, like you mentioned Katrina, you also mentioned Rita, both in 2005. About 3 days out from landfall for Hurricane Katrina, the landfall location wasn't even in the cone.
So let's step back to Hurricane Helene. This one was in both of these, pretty fast-moving hurricanes. You think of 15 to 20 miles per hour, something moving slow, but for hurricane fast. And you were talking that the Florida coast may have dodged, or Florida may have dodged the worst. As this storm moved inland, that's when everything really got bad. But this was a weird setup, because usually you have a hurricane move through, it's just that's what caused the rain. But the southeastern parts of the country had some areas nearly a foot of rain before Helene even moved in, and then you had the terrain. This was just a horrible setup when it comes to rain and flash flooding.
Yeah, mountainous terrain and tropical systems do not mix. And the Carolinas, the big storm for the Carolinas of recent was Florence. That was 2018, I think, at this point. So, we're talking about 6 years ago, but that was the rainiest tropical system in the Carolinas, because it just sat kind of like Hurricane Harvey did off the Texas coast. And now you get a completely different system that, instead of sitting off the coast, it kind of morphed into another upper level storm system. And that the lifting, it's called topographic lifting. Whenever you get winds moving up a mountain, that's air rising, and it just creates a lot of problems as far as rain goes. It was a recipe for disaster, and it's just hearing 200 plus people losing their life in a tropical system. That's something you don't hear about nowadays, because of how much of an improvement the forecasting has gotten, and how much more resilient our homes are. But water is the number one killer in tropical systems for a reason, be it freshwater or saltwater storm surge flooding.
I'm showing you right now parts of North Carolina, 72-hour rainfall of 30 inches. Let's switch over to Hurricane Milton. So I think you were talking rapid intensification. This one, I went to bed one night, it was a Category 1, and then by the next day, it nearly made it to Category 5. It was insane how fast the storm intensified.
Yeah, and I was watching it, while you were asleep. I was up in the morning, and this is, kind of the day before landfall, and, it's like, okay, it's Category 1 hurricane now, it's Category 2, and I think within the course of our 2.5 hour long morning newscast, pretty much every hour, the intensity was bumped up, and by a pretty significant margin. I mean, if my memory serves me correctly, we're talking about a 20 mile per hour wind speed increase over the course of a 3 hour or 2 hour time frame.
So one thing that doesn't get as much attention, but we watch a lot, is the tornadic potential with these storms. And a lot of times you'll see spin up tornadoes. Milton was very different. We're talking some what looked like wedge tornadoes. And before the storm even made landfall on the West Coast, we had significant tornadoes touching down well on the East Coast of Florida.
Now, tropical storms, like you mentioned, Brady, tropical storms and hurricanes, it's a lot of spin. There's no doubt about that. But usually what you see is, like you mentioned, those quick spin-up tornadoes. If you take a look at some of the satellite imagery, you can just see the prolific amount of lightning in those outer feeder bands. Lightning happens in these tropical systems, in these outer bands, but the amount of lightning, I think, just is kind of an attest to how much instability was in the atmosphere. And I think there was at least 2 EF3 tornadoes.
Yeah, that's rare for tropical, for sure.
I think I saw a stat somewhere that I want to say was 90% plus of tropical tornadoes are EF0 or EF1s.
Tampa was extremely worried about storm surge. The bay is not very deep. It's very susceptible to storm surge. But the track made it just south of Tampa, so they went from storm surge to just being in the eye wall of this storm for hours, it seemed like.
And in fact, it was actually reverse storm surge for Tampa Bay as well. It's a small difference. Just about a 20-mile difference northward in the track would have been a complete catastrophe for the Tampa Bay area. Of course, they did get hit very hard. Like you mentioned, the eye wall winds, very heavy rain. Tampa broke their monthly October rainfall record in a day.
Well, we'll continue to track these systems, see what develops the rest of the storm season. But thanks, Sean, for giving us that insight, kind of look into both of these systems.
Of course.
We all know Earth has one moon, but did you know that for the next couple of months, we'll actually have a mini moon orbiting our planet as well? In this week's Degrees of Science, Brady Taylor talked with a Baylor professor about what this mini moon is and the science behind how it happened. We'll have more on this rare celestial treat right after the break.
Welcome into this week's Degrees of Science. We've got a pretty cool thing going on here for the next couple of months. A mini moon has developed around the Earth. And today we're talking with Dr. Barbara Endall. She's from Baylor University. So, Dr. Endall, I guess first thing to ask is, what exactly is a mini moon and how can something like this happen?
Oh, thank you for having me again. A mini moon is any type of satellite that will eventually be caught by the gravitational pull of our planet. A definition of a moon or a satellite is anything that will orbit around a planet or a dwarf planet. So this one just happened to be coming and crossing through the path of our planet and will stick around for just 2 months.
Oh, that's crazy. So does it have to be an asteroid or can it be other stuff that kind of gets caught in the path?
Could be anything. It could be literally anything. But yes, asteroids are more common than not. This one is about the size of a school bus. So it's a pretty big rock out there, not a small one.
How exactly did this asteroid that was just going through space get pulled into our orbit?
So a few decades ago, there was a comet, Shoemaker-Levy, that actually got pulled into the gravitational pull of Jupiter and actually collided and had a big impact and so on. So from that moment on, we thought, hey, Jupiter is actually protecting us against those bodies out there. But the gravitational pull of Jupiter and Mars as well can actually deflect those asteroids as they get closer to those objects and they're being basically using the gravity assist and being pushed towards the inner solar system. And that will place them in particular orbits within the solar system that they will eventually get pulled by the gravitational pull of our own planet.
That's interesting. So it's not going to stay here for long, I think, till late November. Why is it only in our orbit for just a little while?
Well, all the objects in our solar system are actually attracted by the gravitational pull of the sun. The sun is the big kahuna, right? It has most of the mass and everything else. So it is a tug of war between the pull of our planet Earth and the sun. So eventually, when this object is almost about to complete one full orbit, it will be pulled again by the sun.
So you were saying it's pretty decent size, I think about the size of a school bus, roughly. Is this something that a person could see in the sky or maybe see with a telescope?
I wish. Unfortunately, this one is very faint. You would need a 30-inch telescope and a camera. So professional astronomers will be able to see it, but it's not going to be visible in the night sky.
Okay, so it's kind of a cool thing to talk about. Is this rare or does this happen very often?
This is an amazing question. Actually, this particular asteroid has been already a mini moon of our planet back in the 60s, I believe. And we have record of other objects of similar size that have been also attracted to that. Arguably, there is always a dishwasher-sized object orbiting around our planet. We just can't see because, again, those rocks out there, they're very rocky materials, they just reflect the light from the sun. They don't produce their own light. So it's very, very difficult to stumble across one of those.
Yeah, because you think something the size of a school bus is big, but when you're talking in space and coming towards, so they use the, and I'm going to have to look here, the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System. So what is, I know that's to help find asteroids, but what is that system doing and how does it protect us by seeing this stuff?
Well, actually, it has something to do even with the dinosaurs, basically. So we actually have been trying to explain how an extinction of the dinosaurs would happen in 65 million years ago until we finally found the crater. And then, of course, there is like the whole global impact and so on. So in the 90s, from the 90s on, NASA started spending quite some money to fund the observations of the near-Earth asteroids, which will basically map the orbits and we can make the trajectories and see where they're going. Fortunately for us, when we say something comes close to us, and most of the, nearly all the planets in the solar system are in a disk, like we talked about during the eclipse, right? Even the moon is also in the same plane. But the asteroids can come on more inclined planes. So it's just a matter of our planets moving this way and the asteroid is coming with an inclined angle. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to hit, basically, because you add a third dimension.
So as a professor, you've had an interesting year of stuff that even eclipse, we had a partial lunar eclipse, there's an annular eclipse coming up later, and parts of the Pacific. How fun is it to kind of get some of this real world stuff that you can talk with your students?
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, as I say, the universe is fascinating. We can always look at those things and learn new stuff and talk about the composition of the solar system. And an asteroid is basically what's left over from the formation of our solar system. So it's really, really, really interesting and really fascinating.
You can find out more about this mini moon by scanning the QR code on your screen right now to watch on YouTube, or you can head to our website at kwtx.com/degrees-of-science. Weather Extra returns after this. Welcome back to Weather Extra. Last week, we finally got a taste of some of that cool, crisp fall air. And before you know it, winter will be returning soon across the nation. And now climate experts are already predicting it'll feel a lot different than last winter. That's because La Nina is expected to dominate the season this year. The climate pattern is marked by cooler than average ocean temperatures, which could bring more precipitation than normal in some parts of the country. But more precipitation doesn't guarantee there will be more snow. The season is expected to be warmer than normal across the southern half of the U.S. and much of the east. That means that some winter storms in the east could end up wetter rather than snowier. Meanwhile, the combination of wetter and cooler than normal conditions could mean more snow for the Pacific Northwest. According to the Climate Prediction Center, La Nina will likely develop by November. Once it arrives, it will likely persist into early spring of next year. And coming up next week on Weather Extra, meteorologist Sean Bellafury will take a deeper dive on the La Nina forecast and what it means for us in Central Texas this winter. Well, that's all we have for you on this week's episode of Weather Extra. Warmer weather returns for the new week, so hopefully you're able to get outside and enjoy those cooler fall days this past week. We'll see you again next weekend.